The sun streamed in through the windows of the hospital room, illuminating the pale face of the new mother who lay on the bed. The room was quiet, save for the sound of machines beeping in the background. The woman's husband sat beside her, holding her hand tightly. The two of them had been eagerly awaiting the arrival of their first child, but now they were faced with the harsh reality of loss. The mother's mind was a blur as she tried to comprehend what had just happened. Only moments ago, she had been in the throes of labor, pushing with all her might to bring her baby into the world. And then, suddenly, the room had filled with doctors and nurses, rushing to save her child's life. But it was too late. The mother's heart was breaking as she looked up at her husband, tears streaming down her face. She could see the same pain in his eyes, but she couldn't bear to comfort him. She felt like a failure as a parent, as though she had let her child down before they had even had a chance at life. In the days that followed, the mother's grief was all-consuming. She found herself unable to sleep, unable to eat, unable to do anything except cry. The world seemed to be moving on without her, but she couldn't find a way to join them. Her friends and family tried to comfort her, but she felt like an outsider in her own life. Flashbacks to the pregnancy and delivery filled her mind, taunting her with the memories of what could have been. She had been so excited to become a mother, to hold her child in her arms and watch them grow. But now, all of those dreams had been shattered. The mother's grief turned to anger as she began to question everything. Why did this happen? Why was her child taken away from her? She searched for someone to blame, but the only one she could think of was herself. Her relationship with her husband suffered as well. They had always been close, but now she couldn't stand to be around him. She felt like he didn't understand what she was going through, and she resented him for still having a child when she had lost hers. It wasn't until the mother started seeing a therapist that she began to see a glimmer of hope. The therapist helped her to understand that her feelings were normal, that it was okay to grieve for her child. She encouraged the mother to talk about her feelings, to cry, to express herself in any way that felt right. The mother also found solace in support groups, meeting other parents who had experienced similar losses. She felt like she finally had a place where she belonged, where people understood her pain. As time went on, the mother's grief began to shift. She still missed her child, still felt the ache of loss, but she also started to feel a sense of acceptance. She realized that she had done everything she could to bring her child into the world, and that sometimes, things just don't go as planned. The mother began to open up to her husband again, realizing that he was also grieving and needed her support. She started to reach out to her friends, letting them back into her life. And though the pain of her loss would always be with her, she began to find a way to move forward. The mother sat in her doctor's office, nervously fidgeting in her chair. It had been almost 2 years since the loss of her first child, and she was now pregnant again. She had longed for this moment, but now that it was here, she was filled with apprehension and fear. As she spoke with her doctor, the mother's thoughts drifted back to her own childhood. She remembered how much she had longed to become a mother herself, how she had dreamed of holding her child in her arms and watching them grow. But after the loss of her first child, those dreams had been shattered. Now, as she felt the first fluttering movements of her new child, she couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. She knew that there were no guarantees, that anything could happen during pregnancy and childbirth. But she also knew that this new life growing within her was a gift, a chance to experience the joy of parenthood once again. The mother's pregnancy was filled with ups and downs. She struggled with anxiety and fear, always worrying that something might go wrong. But she also experienced moments of pure joy, as she felt her child growing and changing inside her. Throughout the pregnancy, the mother became closer with her husband. They talked about their hopes and fears for their new child, and he supported her through every step of the journey. She also reconnected with her friends. letting them back into her life and sharing her excitement for the new baby. As the due date approached, the mother's anxiety intensified. She couldn't help but think back to the delivery of her first child, and the pain and grief that had followed, but she also knew that this time was different. She had learned to accept that sometimes, things don't go as planned, but that doesn't mean that there isn't hope for the future. Finally, the day of the birth arrived. The mother felt a mixture of excitement and terror as she was wheeled into the delivery room. She clung to her husband's hand, as the doctors and nurses worked to bring their new child into the world. And then, suddenly, there was a cry. The sound filled the room, as the mother's new child was born into the world. The mother felt a surge of joy and relief, as she looked down at her child for the first time. In the days and weeks that followed, the mother's life was consumed with caring for her new child. She marveled at the tiny hands and feet, the soft hair, the curious expressions. She felt a fierce protectiveness towards her child, vowing to do everything in her power to keep them safe and happy. But even as she celebrated the birth of her new child, the mother still felt the pain of her loss. She thought of her first child often, wondering what they would have been like if they had lived. But she also knew that her grief was a part of her, that it didn't have to define her. As the mother watched her new child grow and thrive, she felt a renewed sense of hope and purpose. She knew that there would be challenges ahead, but she also knew that she had the strength to face them. And she knew that, no matter what happened, she would always cherish the life growing within her.